What ancient family tradition did you put a stop to? In my family, every girl's feet were broken and bound when she turned 5. Small feet meant good marriage, higher bride price, proof we were proper daughters. My oldest sister's feet were 4 inches long. She couldn't walk without leaning on walls, but my grandmother called her our family's treasure. My second sister tried to run the night before her binding. They caught her at the neighbor's house and did it anyway while she screamed about wanting to be a teacher. By morning, she couldn't stand. The bone-breaking sounds still visit my dreams. I was 4 when I started planning. Watched how they prepared the bandages, the alum water, the special shoes getting smaller each month. Studied my sister's wounds when grandmother rewrapped them. The way toes folded under, bones snapped, flesh rotting between the folds. The smell of infection that grandmother masked with perfume. My second sister's toes fell off completely. Good, grandmother said. Makes them smaller. But I also watched something else. The foreign doctor who came to our village once a month. Dr. Crimson, who grandmother called a white devil. He'd set up near the market, treating people for free. I saw him argue with families, trying to save girls. Saw him thrown out of houses. Once he treated a girl whose binding had gone septic. She lived but lost her leg. That's when I knew I had a chance if I could reach him. Every night I practiced stretching my feet, running in place silently, building strength, hid food under my bed, stole coins when I could, drew maps of our town from memory. But grandmother was getting suspicious. She'd check my shoes for wear, inspect my feet during baths, even had my cousins follow me. This one's too wild, she'd tell my mother. We might need to bind her at 4. My oldest sister heard this and warned me. They moved mine up too, she whispered while grandmother slept. Because I kept dancing. They'll do it on the next lucky day. I checked the calendar. Only 10 days away. 2 weeks before my official 5th birthday, grandmother started preparing anyway. Soaking the bandages, filing the special nail-breaking tools. Your feet are already too big, she told me. We'll have to break them harder. She measured them every day, frowning. My mother said nothing, just like she'd said nothing for my sisters. That's when the attack started. Every morning, grandmother would grab my feet unexpectedly, bending them to prepare the bones. She'd make me walk on the sides of my feet for hours. Had my aunts hold me down while she pressed her thumbs into my arches until I screamed. The bones must learn to yield, she said. The night before the new date, they made me soak my feet in animal blood and herbs to soften the bones. The whole family gathered to celebrate my becoming a woman. My sisters couldn't dance at my party, could barely stand, but everyone pretended this was beautiful. Grandfather gave a speech about family honor. My uncles toasted my future husband, whoever he'd be. The local matchmaker was already taking notes about my father's business, calculating my value. That's when my second sister slipped me a knife. Run, she whispered. I can't, but you can. But they were ready for runners now. After my second sister's attempt, they locked all the girls in during binding week. Boards on windows, guards at doors. My uncle slept outside my room. At midnight, I used the knife to cut through my bedroom screen, but the moment I touched the ground, dogs started barking. My uncle grabbed my ankle as I climbed down using sheets I'd been secretly knotting for months. Going somewhere, little one? I slashed at his hand with the knife. Drew blood. He let go, cursing. I ran barefoot through the dark streets, my precious unbroken feet carrying me over stones and thorns. Behind me, I could hear shouting. More dogs, my family rousing the neighbors to hunt their wayward daughter. The Christian mission school was 6 villages away, but they knew that's where runners went. I could hear horses on the main road, my grandfather's voice commanding men to check the mission first. So I went the opposite direction, toward the foreigners' medical camp at the edge of the district, twice as far, through rice paddies that sucked at my feet, forest paths that tore my clothes. Miss Catherine, the mission teacher, found me at dawn, collapsed by the roadside, feet bleeding, delirious from exhaustion. She was traveling to the medical camp herself, loaded me onto her cart, covered me with grain sacks, told me not to make a sound. At the checkpoint, my uncle searched the cart, but didn't think to look under the grain. At the medical camp, doctor. Crimson treated my feet while Miss Catherine held my hand. They'll come, I kept saying. They'll take me back. Not while I'm here, she said. My family came that afternoon. 20 of them. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. Miss Catherine helped me onto a narrow cot in the medical tent, where lamplight made shadows jump across canvas walls. Dr. De Crimson knelt beside the cot and lifted one of my feet gently to examine the damage. The cuts looked worse under the bright light with dried blood caked thick between my toes and dirt ground deep into torn skin. A nurse appeared carrying a metal basin of warm water and clean white bandages folded neat in a stack. I gripped Miss Catherine's hand hard when Dr. Crimson touched the deepest gash on my heel and bit my lip to keep from crying out. The nurse dipped a cloth in the water and started washing away the blood and dirt, while I squeezed my eyes shut against the stinging pain. Dr. De Crimson spoke quietly to Miss Catherine in words I couldn't understand while his fingers pressed carefully around the worst cuts. The nurse brought more water when the first basin turned dark red and kept washing until she could see clean skin under all the damage. Dr. the Crimson nodded and started wrapping my feet in soft bandages that felt cool against the burning cuts. After he finished wrapping both feet, Dr. Crimson explained they would keep me hidden in the storage tent behind the main treatment area while my family searched the camp. Miss Catherine said most families give up after a few hours when they can't find their daughters right away and go home to wait for another chance. I wanted to believe her, but I kept remembering my uncle's fingers closing around my ankle like iron and knew my family wouldn't quit that easily. Grandmother had spent weeks preparing those binding tools and measuring my feet every single day. She wouldn't just walk away because I hid for a few hours. The nurse helped me stand carefully on my wrapped feet and led me through a back opening in the tent toward the storage areas. Each step sent sharp pain through my heels, but I followed without complaining because staying still meant getting caught. Before noon, shouting erupted at the camp gate loud enough to hear from inside the storage tent. I recognized grandmother's voice immediately cutting through all the other sounds as she demanded to see the foreign doctor right now. Through a small gap in the tent fabric, I could see the gate where my entire family crowded together in a mass of 20 people. Grandfather stood at the front, gesturing with angry, sweeping motions of his arms, while grandmother's voice got sharper and louder. My mother stood silent behind all the men with her eyes pointed down at the ground like always. I counted my aunts and uncles and cousins all pressed together at the gate and realized they'd brought everyone to show the camp how serious they were about taking me back. The nurse who'd been arranging supplies near me froze when she heard the commotion and looked toward the tent opening with worried eyes. The nurse grabbed my arm quickly and pulled me deeper into the storage area, where wooden crates stacked high created narrow passages between them. She pressed her finger to her lips and whispered for me to stay absolutely quiet no matter what I heard. I crouched down behind the crates in a space barely wide enough for my small body, and listened to grandmother's voice getting louder as she accused the camp of stealing her granddaughter. My hands started shaking when I heard her describing the special binding tools she'd prepared just for me, and how my feet were already too big at 4 years old. She told everyone at the gate about the careful measurements she'd taken, and the extra braking that would be needed because I'd grown too wild. The wooden crates smelled like medicine and dust, and I pressed myself against them, trying to make my body even smaller. Grandmother's voice carried clearly through the tent walls as she explained to Dr. Crimson exactly how she planned to fold my toes under and wrap them tight enough to reshape the bones properly. Dr. Crimson's voice came from the gate area, speaking firmly about patient rights and consent in careful words. He told my family that no one could take a patient from his care without that person's clear agreement to go. Grandfather's voice exploded in response, shouting that I was just a child who belonged to the family, and foreigners had no authority over Chinese daughters. Other family members joined in yelling about tradition and proper customs, and how the camp had no right to interfere. Dr. de Crimson kept his voice steady as he repeated that medical facilities protect patients from harmful procedures, regardless of family wishes. The argument grew louder with more voices joining until I couldn't tell who was shouting what anymore. I heard my uncle's voice rise above the others, saying they would wait at the gate as long as it took to get their property back. The nurse returned after the shouting died down a bit, and led me to an even smaller tent at the very back of the camp that stored grain and dried goods. She arranged empty burlap sacks to create a hiding space in the corner, and put her finger to her lips again before slipping back out through the tent flap. I curled up in the narrow gap between rough sacks that smelled like rice and dirt and old canvas. The argument at the gate continued, but slightly quieter now, with voices rising and falling in waves. I could hear individual words sometimes when someone shouted loud enough. Grandmother kept saying the foreign devils had stolen what belonged to the family. Grandfather's voice boomed about honor and tradition and proper daughters. Through the tent wall, I heard footsteps and movement as camp staff walked back and forth dealing with the crisis at their gate. My uncle's voice suddenly joined the shouting, much louder than before, as he threatened to report the entire camp to the magistrate for kidnapping a child. Grandmother declared the family would wait right there at the gate until the foreign devils returned what they stole. More voices joined in, and I recognized neighbors from our village who must have come along to support my family's claim. The sound of so many people all demanding my return made my chest feel tight, and my breathing come faster. I pressed my hands over my ears but could still hear them clearly through the thin tent walls. Someone started banging on the gateposts, making a rhythmic thumping sound that went on and on. The camp staff spoke to each other in quick, worried voices as they tried to figure out how to handle a crowd that size. Miss Catherine found me in the storage tent sometime later and sat down beside my hiding spot with a gentle smile on her face. She started teaching me to count my breath slowly to calm my racing heart. We counted together in whispers, with her voice guiding mine through the numbers. 1 breath in for 4 counts, then hold for 4, then out for 4 counts. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely hold them still, but we kept counting breaths together over and over. After many rounds of counting, my hands finally stopped shaking enough that I could hold the cup of water she brought without spilling it. She stayed sitting beside me, not saying much, just being there while my heartbeat gradually slowed back to normal. Outside the tent, the voices continued their demands, but Miss Catherine's calm presence made them feel slightly less scary. Through the tent wall later, I heard Dr. Crimson and Miss Catherine talking with another foreigner about legal procedures for protecting children from harmful customs. The adult voices debated back and forth about whether tradition or physical safety should matter more when families demand their daughters back for binding. They used complicated words I didn't fully understand about rights and laws and cultural practices, but I recognized the same basic argument that my second sister's screams had made the night they bound her feet anyway. She'd screamed that she wanted to be a teacher and have whole feet, and they'd done it regardless because tradition mattered more than what she wanted. The foreign voices talked about documentation and magistrates and official procedures, while my family waited outside ready to take me back the moment they got a chance. The nurse returned when the light outside started turning orange with sunset to change my bandages. She unwrapped the cloth carefully, and I saw for the first time how badly damaged my feet really were in full daylight. Deep cuts crossed both soles where sharp stones had torn through the skin during my barefoot run through the forest. My heels were raw and red with patches of skin scraped completely away. Smaller cuts covered my toes and the sides of my feet from thorns and rocks. The nurse cleaned each wound with stinging medicine that made me bite my tongue to stay quiet. She wrapped fresh bandages around both feet slowly and carefully, while explaining that feet need to be strong and whole to carry a person through their entire life. Her hands were gentle as she worked, and her voice stayed calm even though I could hear my family still shouting outside. When she finished wrapping, she helped me stand on the newly bandaged feet and showed me how to walk without putting too much weight on the worst cuts. After the nurse gathers her supplies and leaves the tent, I wait until her footsteps fade before turning to Mrs. Catherine and whispering that grandmother always finds everything she's looking for. Mrs. Catherine sits very still for a moment before answering that the camp will protect me as long as they possibly can, but she won't lie and say I'm completely safe. Her words scare me more than false promises would because now I know the danger is real and ongoing. Outside the tent walls, the shouting continues in waves as different family members take turns demanding my return. I pull my knees up to my chest and wrap my arms around them, trying to make myself smaller in the hiding space between the grain sacks. Mrs. Catherine stays beside me, not saying much, but her presence helps keep the fear from swallowing me completely. As the light coming through the tent fabric shifts from bright to orange, I hear new sounds outside the gate. Blankets being spread on the ground, food baskets opening with soft creaking sounds. My family is settling in for a long wait instead of giving up and going home like Mrs. Catherine hoped they would. Grandmother's voice rises above the others, telling anyone who will listen that proper families don't abandon their daughters to foreign devils who don't understand Chinese ways. She talks about duty and tradition and family honor, while people from the village gather to watch the standoff. The camp staff move around outside my hiding spot, lighting extra lanterns as darkness falls. Through gaps in the tent fabric, I see the yellow glow spreading across the compound, turning everything into strange shadows. This isn't going to end in a few hours like the adults hoped. My family has brought enough supplies to stay for days. Later that evening, I hear Dr. Crimson and Mrs. Catherine talking in low voices near my tent. They're discussing someone who might help with the standoff. Mrs. Catherine mentions a man from the provincial office who has handled disputes like this before. Someone who understands both local law and what happens to children caught between tradition and safety. Dr. de Crimson agrees they should send a messenger at first light to request this person's help. Their voices fade as they walk away to make arrangements. Mrs. Catherine returns after a while and sits down beside me again. She starts asking me simple questions in a gentle voice. Do I want to go back to my family? I shake my head so hard it makes my neck hurt. She asks if I understand what foot binding would do to me. I describe my oldest sister's feet in detail. How she can't walk without leaning on walls. How she cries when she has to move from room to room. I tell her about my second sister's toes falling off during the binding process, and how grandmother said it was good because it made her feet smaller. Mrs. Catherine's eyes get sad while I talk, but she nods and says my clear answers might help convince the authorities later. She makes me practice saying the words several times until I can speak them without my voice shaking too much. The night passes slowly with me drifting in and out of sleep while voices continue outside the gate. Just after dawn breaks, I hear a single voice calling out different from the angry shouting of the previous day. It's my mother asking quietly to speak with me. Camp guards bring Dr. Crimson to the gate, and I hear him refuse to let her inside. But he says she can stand where I might see her from a distance if she stays calm. I peek through a gap in the tent wall and see my mother standing alone at the gate. She's not shouting or making demands like the others. She just asks me to come home and accept my fate like a good daughter should. Her face looks tired and sad. For a moment watching her stand there, I feel my determination starting to crack. Then I remember last month when I had to help my oldest sister walk to the outhouse. She leaned her full weight on me because her bound feet couldn't support her anymore. Every tiny step made her cry from pain shooting up her legs. The memory of her suffering hardens something inside my chest, and I turn away from the gap in the tent wall without calling out to my mother. I hear her voice continue for a few more minutes before she finally gives up and walks back to where the rest of the family is camped. A camp assistant comes to my hiding place later in the morning carrying a thick book with a leather cover. He asks me to unwrap my feet so he can look at them carefully. Then he opens the book and starts writing with a pen that scratches across the paper, making permanent marks. Dr. Crimson explains they're creating a medical record of every cut and bruise on my feet. The assistant writes down details about how deep the cuts are and where infection might start if I'm forced back before healing finishes. He measures the gashes with a small ruler and notes the exact sizes. Dr. Crimson says this record might protect me later if authorities question why I can't be returned safely to my family. The assistant's pen keeps moving across the pages, filling them with words and numbers that might save me. Around midday, I hear the sound of cartwheels and horse hooves approaching the camp gate. A man arrives wearing dark robes and carrying papers under his arm. This must be the mediator Mrs. Catherine mentioned. He speaks with Dr. Crimson first near the main tent. Then he walks to the gate to hear what my family wants to say. I watch from my storage tent hiding place as he listens to both sides. His face shows nothing about which argument he believes or what he thinks should happen. He just nods and takes notes on his papers while people talk. Grandfather steps forward at the gate to present our family's case with grandmother standing right beside him. He talks about generations of proper tradition going back further than anyone can remember. He explains the bride price I'll bring with small feet and the good marriage that will lift up our entire family. Grandmother adds her voice describing how binding is done out of love to give daughters the best possible life. She talks about my sisters and how valuable they've become because of their small feet. The mediator writes everything down without showing any reaction to their words. Dr. Crimson brings the mediator inside the camp fence and leads him to the medical ward where other girls are recovering. I follow at a distance, staying out of sight but close enough to see what happens. The doctor introduces the mediator to two girls who are being treated for binding infections. One girl's feet smell terrible even though the nurses clean them every day. The other girl can't put any weight on her wrapped feet without screaming in pain. The mediator's expression shifts slightly as he watches the girls suffer. He asks them questions about how long they've been bound and whether they wanted it done. And then he writes more notes on his papers before thanking Dr. Crimson and walking back toward the gate where my family waits for his decision. My mother steps forward from the group at the gate and speaks quietly to the mediator, asking for a private word. He nods, and they walk a few steps away from the others, while grandmother watches with sharp eyes. I can see my mother's lips moving but can't hear what she says from my hiding spot behind the medical tent. After a minute, the mediator walks toward where I'm crouched and asks if I want to say goodbye to grandmother before he makes his decision. My head shakes so hard my neck hurts, and I whisper that grandmother will try to take me if I get close enough. The mediator writes something on his papers and walks back to the gate without making me go near her. My mother's face drops when she sees me refuse and she turns away quickly. Late in the afternoon, shouting erupts from the medical ward when the girl with the infected feet suddenly gets much worse. Her fever spikes and she starts talking nonsense that doesn't make sense while nurses rush around her bed trying to cool her down with wet cloths. I peek through the tent opening and see 3 nurses working over her while she thrashes and moans. Voices outside the camp start blaming the foreign doctor for not preventing the infection, even though everyone knows it came from the binding itself. Grandmother's voice rises above the others saying, "This proves foreign medicine kills Chinese daughters." The camp staff close the ward curtains, but the girls' cries carry across the compound, making everyone nervous. Dr. Crimson orders all the tents locked down for the night and assigns staff to watch in shifts around the fence. Mrs. Catherine finds me in my storage tent and says we need to move to a different hiding place that's safer. She leads me through the dark to another storage area at the very back of the compound where they keep grain and supplies. This new tent has thicker walls and only one small entrance that can be guarded easily. Mrs. Catherine arranges some sacks to make a sleeping spot and stays nearby with a lamp burning low. I try to sleep but keep startling awake at every sound, convinced my uncle has found a way inside the fence. Every creak of wood or rustle of fabric makes my heart pound, and my hands grip the borrowed shoes I keep right next to me. The lamp flame flickers and makes shadows dance on the tent walls that look like people moving. I count my breaths like Mrs. Catherine taught me, but sleep won't come. Before sunrise, I force myself to practice walking despite the pain shooting through my cut feet. I grip a wooden post in the corner and take slow steps around the small tent, putting weight on my soles even though it hurts. Each step sends sharp feelings up my legs, but I keep moving because I won't let them carry me back helpless. My feet are still healing and the bandages rub against the cuts, but I need to stay strong enough to run again if I have to. I make myself walk in circles 10 times before sitting down to rest. My family tries a new approach at morning light by offering the camp money to cover my medical costs if they'll return me. Grandfather counts out coins at the gate while grandmother explains they only want what belongs to them. She talks about how much they've already spent preparing for my binding, and how the family deserves to get their daughter back. Dr. Crimson refuses firmly, and says children aren't property that can be purchased back. His voice stays calm, but I can hear anger underneath when he tells them to take their money and leave. Grandfather raises his voice, demanding to know what right foreigners have to interfere with Chinese family matters. The argument goes back and forth for several minutes before both sides give up and return to their positions. The mediator returns around midday and warns both sides that if they can't reach agreement by sunset, he'll have to petition the magistrate for an official ruling. His warning creates visible tension as everyone realizes the dispute is getting bigger than just a family matter. Grandmother's face hardens with determination while Dr. Crimson looks worried about involving local authorities who might favor tradition over foreign medical opinions. The mediator gives them until evening to work something out before he takes the case to higher powers. During the quiet afternoon, Mrs. Catherine sits with me in a patch of sunlight behind the storage tent and asks what name I'd like to use at the mission school if I stay. I've never thought about choosing anything for myself before, and the question feels too big to answer. The idea that I could pick my own name instead of just being called what my family decided seems impossible. We sit in silence looking at clouds while I try to imagine a future different from the one my family planned for me. Miss Catherine doesn't push me to answer, but just sits quietly letting me think about possibilities I never knew existed. My aunt suddenly appears at the fence screaming that my second sister is being punished at home for helping me escape. She shouts details about how they're keeping my sister locked in her room without food for encouraging my bad behavior. The words hit me like stones, and I feel sick knowing my escape is causing my sister new suffering. My aunt yells that it's my fault my sister is being hurt, and demands I come home to stop her punishment. I want to cover my ears but force myself to listen because my sister deserves that much. The guilt sits heavy in my stomach knowing she's paying the price for slipping me that knife. The camp staff post a simple written notice at the gate explaining that patients have the right to refuse harmful medical procedures. The paper lists facts about foot binding problems including infection, bone damage, and permanent disability that can result from the practice. Several villagers who can read gather to look at the notice and discuss what it says. My family dismisses it as foreign lies meant to trick Chinese people into abandoning proper customs. Grandmother tears the notice down and rips it into pieces, letting them fall on the ground. Dr. the Crimson comes out and posts another copy higher up where she can't reach it easily. Through a gap in the fence, I catch a glimpse of my oldest sister leaning heavily on our mother's arm. She can only stand for a few minutes before needing to sit, and even from a distance I can see pain in the way she holds herself. Her tiny bound feet can't support her weight properly, and every step looks like it hurts. The sight fills me with anger at what was done to her, and fear that I almost suffered the same thing. I watch her lower herself carefully onto a stool someone brought, and see her face relax slightly when the pressure comes off her feet. That's what they wanted to do to me, and would still do if they get the chance. The afternoon sky turns dark, and heavy clouds roll in fast over the camp. Wind picks up suddenly, making the tent fabric snap and shake around me. I press against the wooden crates in my hiding spot, as the first drops of rain hit the tent roof like thrown pebbles. The sound gets louder and louder until it's a constant drumming that makes it hard to hear anything else. Through the crack in the wall, I can still see my family outside the gate, and nobody moves to leave. Grandmother stands under a tree with her arms crossed while rain soaks through her clothes. Grandfather huddles with the other men, but they don't go home either. Water pools around their feet in the dirt, and still they wait. I watch grandmother's wet hair stick to her face and wonder what it would take to make them give up. The storm lasts for over an hour, and by the time it stops, everyone outside looks miserable and cold, but they're all still there. That's when I understand they really won't leave no matter what happens. The nurse comes to check on me after the rain ends and brings dry blankets because my hiding spot got damp from leaks in the tent roof. She wraps one around my shoulders and tells me to try to sleep, but I can't stop shaking from more than just cold. The wet fabric smell fills the tent, and I curl up tighter between the grain sacks, listening to water drip from the tent edges. Sometime deep in the night, a loud ripping sound tears through the quiet, and I jerk awake with my heart beating fast. A nurse sleeping in the front part of the tent shouts an alarm, and I hear running footsteps. The ripping sound came from the back wall where someone cut through the fabric with a knife. I can see the long slice in the tent material flapping in the wind and letting in cold air. Guards rush over with lanterns held high and search around the outside, but whoever did it ran away into the darkness. They find nothing except the cut fabric and some footprints in the mud that could belong to anyone. The nurse checks on me and finds me pressed into the corner behind the crates with my hands covering my mouth to keep from making noise. She looks scared too, which makes everything worse because adults aren't supposed to be afraid. The guards nail boards over the cut section and post someone to watch the tent for the rest of the night, but I can't fall back asleep. Every small sound makes me think someone's coming back to finish cutting their way inside. Just before dawn, Dr. Crimson comes to my hiding spot and tells me to gather my things quickly. He says the storage tent isn't safe anymore after last night's attack. The nurse helps me stand on my sore feet, and we move through the quiet camp to the main staff building. Dr. Crimson unlocks a small room that has real walls instead of fabric, and a solid wooden door with a metal lock. The window sits high up near the ceiling where nobody could reach it from outside, even standing on something. There's a narrow bed with a thin mattress and a small table with a basin for washing. I set my borrowed shoes next to the bed and climb onto the mattress, which feels softer than the grain sacks. Dr. de Crimson locks the door from outside, and I hear his footsteps walk away. The room is tiny, but the walls feel safer than tent fabric that anyone could cut through. I lie down fully dressed with my shoes within arm's reach, and finally let myself close my eyes. The exhaustion from another night of fear pulls me under into sleep so deep I don't dream. When I wake up, the sun is already high, and I can hear voices outside talking in normal daytime tones. The mediator spends the whole morning walking through our village, asking neighbors questions about my family and the binding tradition. I learn about this later from Miss Catherine, who hears the reports when he returns. Some people tell him my family follows proper customs and shows respect for tradition that goes back many generations. They say grandmother is right to want her granddaughter bound like all proper girls. But other people speak more quietly about the screams they heard when my sisters were bound. One neighbor mentions seeing my second sister try to run away, and how they had to hold her down. Another person talks about the smell of infection that came from our house for weeks after my oldest sister's binding. The mediator writes everything down in his papers without showing what he thinks about any of it. The mixed answers show how the whole community is split between people who think tradition matters most and people who think maybe the tradition causes too much harm. Miss Catherine says the mediator looked troubled when he came back to the camp, but he didn't say which side he believes. By midday, I noticed the nurses moving around the medical ward looking worried and talking in hushed voices. The supply cart that usually comes every few days couldn't get through because my family is blocking the road. The camp is running low on clean bandages, and the nurse has to wash old ones and hang them to dry so they can be used again. Medicine bottles sit nearly empty on the shelves, and there's not enough clean cloth for all the patients who need fresh wrappings. I watch through the doorway as the nurse rewraps a girl's infected feet with bandages that were already used once before. The girl winces when the nurse touches the sore spots but doesn't cry out. I overhear staff members talking quietly near my room about how the standoff is creating problems for everyone in the camp, not just me. One person says they might have to turn away new patients if supplies don't come soon. Another voice mentions that sick people in the village won't get treatment because of the blocked road. The words make my stomach hurt in a different way than hunger. I press my hands against my middle and feel sick knowing that I'm the reason other people can't get help they need. Through the wall that afternoon, I hear Dr. Crimson and Mr. Catherine talking in voices they're trying to keep quiet, but I can still make out most words. Someone suggests that protecting one child shouldn't risk the entire camp's mission and all the other patients who need medical care. Miss Catherine's voice sounds tired when she responds, but I can't hear exactly what she says. Dr. De Crimson mentions something about principles and not backing down to threats. The argument goes back and forth with both of them sounding frustrated and worried at the same time. I slide down to sit on the floor with my back against the wall and pull my knees up to my chest. The idea that I might be causing the medical camp to fail makes me want to cry, but I bite my lip hard to stop the tears. I don't want to be the reason sick people can't get help, but I also can't let them take me back to break my feet. There's no good choice that doesn't hurt someone. A teacher from the mission school arrives in the afternoon and sets up a quiet lesson for the girls who are recovering in the medical ward. She brings a slate board and some chalk and starts teaching simple characters. I watch from the doorway of my room as she draws the character for tree with its straight trunk and spreading branches. Then she shows them water with its flowing lines and sky with its open space. The girls copy the marks carefully onto their own small slates. The teacher notices me watching and waves me over to join them. I limp across the room on my healing feet and she hands me a piece of chalk. It feels smooth and dusty in my fingers and leaves white marks on my skin. She guides my hand to show me how to make the strokes for tree, and I copy it slowly. The chalk squeaks against the slate as I drag it through the lines. My character looks shaky and uneven compared to the teacher's perfect one, but she smiles and nods. This is my first time ever holding chalk or trying to write anything. My family never thought girls needed to learn characters since we just get married and have children. But here I am making marks that mean something and nobody is stopping me. Word spreads through the camp by evening that the magistrate has agreed to hear my family's complaint. The session will happen in 3 days at his courtyard in the main village. Everyone becomes tense when they hear the news because an official decision is coming soon. Miss Catherine finds me in my room and sits on the edge of the bed to explain what this means. She says the magistrate has the authority to order me return to my family if he decides tradition is more important than foreign medical opinions. Her honesty scares me, but I'm glad she doesn't pretend everything will definitely work out fine. We have 3 days to prepare for whatever the magistrate decides. That evening, Miss Catherine stays with me and starts preparing me for what might happen at the hearing. She teaches me to speak clearly and simply when I answer questions. We practice with her asking why I ran away, and me explaining that I wanted to keep my feet whole like they are. She asks what I'm afraid will happen if I go back, and I describe how they'll break my bones and wrap them tight until my toes fold under, and maybe fall off like my second sisters did. My voice shakes the first few times I say these things out loud, but Miss Catherine makes me repeat the answers over and over. She says if I have to speak to the magistrate, I need to say the words without crying if possible, because he'll take me more seriously. We practice until I can get through the whole explanation with only a little trembling in my voice. She reminds me to look at the magistrate when I speak, and to use simple words he'll understand. The practice makes the hearing feel more real and more frightening, but at least now I know what to expect. That night, I arrange my borrowed shoes right next to the bed where I can grab them in an instant if I need to. They're still too big for my feet, so I've stuffed cloth into the toes to make them stay on better. The extra padding makes them fit snugly enough that I could run in them if I had to. Having the shoes within reach makes me feel slightly less helpless, even though I know my cut feet haven't healed enough for another long escape. The deepest cuts still hurt when I put weight on them, and the nurse says I need at least another week before the wounds close completely. But I keep the shoes ready anyway because being prepared feels better than being caught without them. I lie in the narrow bed staring at the dark ceiling and listening to night sounds outside the locked door. Tomorrow the mediator will make his report, and then we'll wait 2 more days until the magistrate decides my fate. I don't know if 3 days is enough time for my feet to heal, or for me to figure out what to do if the decision goes against me. Morning comes too fast and my whole body feels wrong when Miss Catherine wakes me before sunrise. My legs shake when I try to stand, and I have to grip the bed frame to stay upright. The nurse helps me into clean clothes while my hands won't stop moving, and my stomach feels like it's trying to climb out through my throat. Dr. Crimson loads me into the cart with Miss Catherine beside me, and we start the journey to the main village where the magistrate holds his sessions. The road bumps under the wheels, and each jolt makes my cuts hurt, but the pain in my feet is nothing compared to the fear making my chest tight. When we reach the magistrate's courtyard, I see them all waiting. 20 family members stand in neat rows wearing their best clothes to show they're serious and proper. Grandmother stands at the very front with her arms crossed over her chest, and her face looks certain like she's already won. Grandfather stands beside her in his formal robes, and my mother hovers behind them with her eyes down. My sisters aren't here because they can't walk far enough to make the trip. I climb down from the cart on shaking legs, and Ms. Catherine has to steady me when my knees try to give out. The magistrate sits on a raised platform under a canopy and gestures for everyone to come forward. My family moves as one group while I stand with Dr. Crimson and Ms. Catherine on the opposite side. The magistrate calls for the family to present their case first, and grandfather steps forward. He speaks in a strong voice about family rights that go back hundreds of years and how daughters belong to their families until marriage. He talks about tradition and honor and duty, like these words are weapons that can force me back home. Grandmother adds her voice next, and she's better at this than grandfather because she makes it sound emotional and caring. She describes the bride price I'll lose if my feet stay big and ugly. She talks about the shame I'll bring to the whole family if I refuse to follow proper customs. Then she does something that makes my stomach hurt worse. She describes foot binding as an act of love that mothers do to prepare their daughters for good marriages and security. She says breaking bones and wrapping feet tight is how families show they care about their daughters' futures. Her words make the binding sound beautiful instead of what it really is. Several people in the courtyard nod along with her speech, and I realize some of them actually believe this. The magistrate listens without showing what he thinks and writes notes on paper in front of him. When grandmother finishes talking, she looks right at me with eyes that promise punishment if I come back. Dr. Crimson takes his turn next and pulls out his thick medical ledger filled with careful notes. He describes the harm he's seen from treating foot binding cases over the past 5 years. He talks about infections that turn feet black and smell like death. He mentions gangrene that requires cutting off toes or whole feet to save lives. He explains how girls lose the ability to walk properly or stand without help. The doctor shows the magistrate pages of notes about girls whose feet became septic from the tight wrapping that cuts off blood flow. He's careful not to show the really disturbing details, but makes it clear that foot binding causes permanent damage to healthy children who did nothing wrong. My family shifts and whispers during his testimony, and I hear grandmother mutter something about foreign devils who don't understand Chinese ways. The magistrate asks Dr. Crimson several questions about his training and whether he's treated many cases. The doctor answers calmly and mentions the girl who died 2 weeks ago from binding complications. The courtyard goes quiet when he says her age was only 6 years old. Then the magistrate looks at me and calls me forward. My heart pounds so hard I think everyone in the courtyard can hear it beating. I walk to stand before the raised platform trying to remember everything Ms. Catherine taught me about speaking clearly. The magistrate asks why I ran away from home, and I force my voice to work. I say I ran away because I wanted to keep my feet whole like they are now. My voice cracks when I add that I'm afraid to go back because they'll bind me anyway, and I'll end up like my sisters. I describe how my oldest sister can't walk without leaning on walls, and how my second sister's toes fell off completely during her binding. The words come out shaky, but I get them all said without crying. The magistrate asks if I understand that foot binding is an old tradition, and I nod and say yes, but I still don't want it done to me. He asks what I think will happen if I stay at the medical camp, and I tell him I hope to learn reading and writing at the mission school. Grandmother makes a loud noise at this, like the idea of me learning is offensive. The magistrate writes more notes and asks several other questions about my feet and whether they're healing properly. I answer each one as simply as I can while my family stares at me from across the courtyard. Finally, the magistrate announces he needs time to think about both arguments before making his ruling. He says the case involves important questions about family rights and children's welfare that require careful consideration. Then he issues a temporary order allowing me to remain at the medical camp while he reviews everything. The decision makes my knees go weak with relief, but I know it's not final. My family could still win when he makes his real ruling. Outside the courtyard, after the hearing ends, one of my cousins walks past me and spits on the ground near my feet. She calls me a disgrace to the family loud enough for everyone to hear. Other relatives turn their backs as we pass and refuse to look at me. My mother keeps her eyes on the ground the whole time and won't meet my gaze when I try to catch her attention. The rejection stings sharp in my chest, even though I knew it was coming when I chose to run. They load back into their carts and leave without saying goodbye. Back at the camp, Dr. Crimson and Ms. Catherine sit together in the staff building discussing what happens next. I sit nearby listening as they make a new plan. Ms. Catherine says I need to move to the mission compound several villages away, where I'll be safer during the waiting period. The mission has high walls and more staff who can protect me if my family tries another attempt to take me. Dr. Crimson agrees, and they start arranging papers and transportation for the transfer. They plan to move me in 3 days once everything is ready. That night, I lie in bed trying to sleep, but my mind won't stop replaying the hearing. I keep seeing grandmother's certain face and hearing her describe binding as love. The nurse comes to my room late with urgent whispers that wake me fully. She says she overheard villagers at the market talking about grandmother hiring men to take me by force before the transfer happens. The plan is to grab me during the day when guards are busy with regular camp work and can't respond fast. I spend the rest of the night rigid with fear, listening to every sound outside. Every creak of wood or rustle of wind makes me think someone's coming through the walls. Morning finally arrives and I'm exhausted, but Ms. Catherine has a surprise that helps. She brings me paper and a brush with ink and shows me how to write my name in simple characters. Her hand guides mine through the strokes, and the marks look shaky and uncertain, but they're mine. I practice writing the characters over and over on the paper until the shapes become slightly steadier. Each time I write my name, it feels like I'm creating something that belongs only to me. The brush strokes represent a choice I made instead of something forced on me. Miss Catherine smiles and says I'm learning fast. The next morning proves the nurse's warning was right. A dozen family members make a coordinated push at the camp gate, shoving hard against the fence. They're shouting about their rights and demanding immediate return of their daughter. The noise brings everyone running and guards rush to reinforce the gate while the wood creaks under the pressure. Dr. Crimson appears and shouts for order. He threatens to call the provincial authorities if they don't stop. Grandmother's voice rises above the others, yelling that foreigners have no right to keep Chinese daughters from their families. The fence holds, but just barely, and I watch from the staff building window with my heart racing. Through the fence slats, I see faces pressed against the wood, and one of them is my second sister standing near the back of the crowd. Our eyes lock for just a second while everyone else is shouting and pushing. Her lips move carefully, forming a single word that looks like run. Nobody else notices her silent message, but I understand she's still trying to help me, even though they probably punished her badly for giving me the knife. She turns away quickly before anyone can see us looking at each other and disappears back into the crowd of angry relatives. The gate holds against the pushing, but I can see the wood starting to bend under all the weight. Guards rush to add support beams while Dr. Crimson keeps shouting warnings about calling higher authorities. Grandmother's voice rises above everyone else, demanding they return what was stolen from the family. The noise is so loud it makes my ears hurt even from inside the building. After what feels like hours, the crowd finally backs away from the gate, but they don't leave. They set up camp right outside with blankets and food baskets, making it clear they plan to wait as long as it takes. I stay at the window watching until Miss Catherine comes to move me to a different hiding spot farther from the fence. That afternoon, the girl with the badly infected feet suddenly gets much worse. I hear urgent voices from the medical ward and see nurses running between tents carrying supplies. The girl's fever spikes so high she starts talking nonsense and thrashing on her cot. Dr. Crimson works over her for hours, trying everything he knows, but the infection has spread too far into her blood. By evening, she stops breathing despite all the medicine and care. The nurses cry openly while they prepare her small body. Dr. Crimson sits on a stool with his head in his hands, looking completely beaten down. I learn from the other patients that the girl was only 6 years old. Her feet had been bound for just 8 months before the infection took hold and killed her. The news hits me hard because she was barely older than me, and now she's dead from the same thing my family wanted to do to my feet. Word about the death spreads fast through the village. By morning, there are even more people gathered outside the camp fence. Some of them start blaming Dr. Crimson for not saving the girl. Angry voices call him a white devil who lets Chinese girls die while hiding runaways from their proper families. The accusations don't make any sense because the binding caused the infection, not the doctor's treatment. But people want someone to blame, and the foreign doctor makes an easy target. The mood outside turns uglier as villagers who supported the camp before now question whether foreigners should interfere with local customs. I hear people saying that girls die from many things, and binding is part of being a proper daughter. The growing hostility makes the camp staff nervous. Guards watch the fence more carefully, and Dr. Crimson stops going to the gate to argue. A messenger arrives from the magistrate bringing an official paper with a red seal. The magistrate sends word that the girl's death has made him speed up his review. He's approving the emergency transfer to the mission compound right away instead of making me wait. Papers are rushed through with stamps and signatures while camp staff starts packing supplies for the journey. Miss Catherine helps me gather my few belongings, which doesn't take long since I only have the borrowed shoes and the paper where I practiced writing my name. She rolls the paper carefully and tucks it into a cloth bag along with some dried food for the trip. Staff members load a cart with grain sacks and medical supplies that need to go to the mission anyway. They build a hiding space for me under a tarp in the back of the cart bed. Miss Catherine explains we'll leave before sunrise when fewer people are watching the roads. I try to sleep that night but keep startling awake thinking about the checkpoint and what happens if my family finds me again. We leave in the dark hours before dawn when the sky is still black. I climb into the cart and curl up between grain sacks while staff members arrange the tarp over me. The heavy fabric blocks out all light and makes the air feel thick. Miss Catherine climbs onto the driver's seat, trying to look casual like she's just making a normal supply run. The cart starts rolling and I clutch my borrowed shoes tight against my chest. My heart pounds so hard I worry people outside can hear it. The wheels creak and bump over the dirt road as we pass through the sleeping village. I hear a dog bark somewhere nearby and freeze, thinking it will wake people up. But the cart keeps moving and nobody stops us. We roll past my family's camp outside the medical compound, and I hold my breath until we're well beyond it. The checkpoint at the district border appears just as the sky starts getting lighter. I hear voices ahead and feel the cart slow down. Through a gap in the tarp, I see a small crowd gathered, including 2 of my uncles. They step into the road, blocking our path. One of them demands the right to search the cart for contraband. Miss Catherine tries to argue, but they're already pulling at the grain sacks. Rough hands yank at the tarp above me, letting in sudden bright light. My uncle's hand closes around my ankle exactly like the night I escaped from my bedroom. The familiar grip sends terror shooting through my whole body. I freeze, completely unable to scream or fight or do anything except feel that hand on my ankle again. The tarp gets yanked away, leaving me exposed in the cart bed with scattered grain all around. My uncle starts pulling me toward him by the ankle while shouting that he's found his niece being smuggled away. I try to kick free, but his grip is too strong. Miss Catherine jumps down from the driver's seat, yelling that he has no legal right to take me. She waves the magistrate's paper with the red seal. My uncle ignores her and keeps pulling me across the rough cart bed. The wood scrapes against my back as I slide toward him. Camp staff who came with us form a barrier between my uncle and the cart. Someone runs off down the road toward the village constable's house. A scuffle breaks out with shoving and raised voices. My uncle tries to push through the staff members to reach me. I scramble backward to the far corner of the cart bed, pressing against the wooden side. There's nowhere else to go. My other uncle joins the fight, trying to help pull people away. The cart rocks from all the pushing and shoving. I grip the cart edge so hard my fingers hurt. People are yelling, and I can't understand most of the words through my panic. The constable arrives wearing his official jacket and carrying a wooden staff. He shouts for everyone to stop and pushes his way through the crowd. Someone hands him the magistrate's paper, and he reads it out loud. The order states clearly that I'm to remain in mission custody while the case is under review. My uncle argues and makes threats about reporting this to higher authorities. The constable warns that interfering with a magistrate's order carries serious penalties. My uncle's face turns red, but he finally lets go of my ankle and steps back. The crowd breaks up slowly, with people muttering and shooting hostile looks at our cart. The constable stays nearby while Miss Catherine climbs back onto the driver's seat. The cart starts moving again, and I stay pressed against the back corner, watching behind us to make sure nobody follows. The road stretches ahead through rice fields and small villages. We travel for hours with the sun climbing higher and getting hot. My legs cramp from staying curled in the same position, but I don't dare move around much. Every time we pass people on the road, I hold still, thinking they might recognize me. The mission compound finally appears in the distance with high walls and a solid gate. We roll through the entrance, and the gate closes behind us with a heavy thunk that sounds final. Staff members help me out of the cart, and my legs shake when I try to stand. A mission teacher shows me to a room with 3 other girls who study at the school. I get assigned a narrow bed by a window. The room has real walls made of brick instead of tent fabric. The door has a lock that works from inside, which the teacher shows me how to use. I sit on the bed, testing the mattress and looking around at the solid walls. The other girls watch me quietly from their beds. My hands still shake from the morning's confrontation at the checkpoint. I can still feel my uncle's grip on my ankle like a ghost touch that won't go away. The borrowed shoes sit beside my bed, and I reach down to touch them, making sure they're really there. Through the window, I can see the mission courtyard and the high walls that separate this place from the village outside. The walls make me feel slightly safer, but I know my family is still out there somewhere planning their next attempt. That evening, a small child appears at the compound gate holding a folded paper. The guards take it and bring it to Miss Catherine, who reads it first before handing it to me. The note uses formal characters I can barely understand, but Miss Catherine explains slowly what it says. My family has removed my name from the family register. I no longer exist in their records as a daughter. The paper feels rough in my hands, and I stare at the characters, trying to make sense of being erased. Part of me feels like crying because my mother and sisters are really gone now. Another part feels lighter, like a weight lifted off my chest. I fold the paper carefully and put it under my mattress next to my borrowed shoes. Miss Catherine sits beside my bed after the other girls fall asleep and talks quietly about what happens next. She doesn't promise everything will be fine or that I'm completely safe now. Instead, she explains that choosing this path means accepting hard things like family rejection and people judging me. She says running away was just the start, and the difficult part continues for a long time. Her honest words scare me, but also help me understand this isn't a simple escape with a happy ending. The journey keeps going with new challenges ahead. I nod slowly, and she pats my hand before leaving me to sleep. The next morning, a nurse brings a basin of warm water and helps me soak my feet. The water turns reddish-brown as dried blood and dirt work out of the deeper cuts. I watch the color spread through the clear water, feeling strange about seeing my own blood like this. The nurse points out which cuts are healing well, and which ones might leave scars. Some of the gashes on my heels are deep enough that the skin won't grow back smooth. She shows me how to wrap my feet with clean cloth to protect the healing skin without binding them tight. The wrapping supports my feet but lets them move and grow naturally. She makes me practice wrapping them myself until I can do it properly without her help. My fingers fumble with the cloth at first, but I keep trying until the wrapping stays secure. Learning to take care of my own feet feels powerful, like I'm doing something my family never taught me. 2 weeks pass with daily routines of lessons and healing. One afternoon, another child slips through the gate with a note and disappears before anyone can question him. The paper is rougher this time, and the characters are shaky like someone wrote them while hiding. The message says my second sister is being punished with extra work and restricted movement, but she's alive. At the bottom, there's a single sentence in characters so uneven they barely make sense. The nurse helps me read it, and the words say my sister is glad I got away. I stare at those shaky characters, knowing my sister probably wrote them in secret, risking more punishment. She must have learned to write somehow, despite grandmother forbidding it. I fold the note as carefully as the first one and put it under my pillow where I can touch it at night. Knowing she's alive and still supporting me makes the separation hurt less. I join the other girls for daily lessons in a room with low tables and slate boards. A teacher shows us basic characters for tree, water, and sky. We copy them over and over until our hands cramp. The chalk feels strange against my fingers and the characters look crooked when I write them, but slowly they get straighter with practice. A nurse also teaches us proper foot care in the afternoons, showing how to wrap feet for support during healing. She brings clean bandages and shows us how to check for infection or new wounds. The skills feel important, like I'm learning to protect myself in ways my family never allowed. The other girls practice wrapping each other's feet, and we help correct mistakes. One girl shows me a better way to tuck the end of the bandage so it stays secure. I show her how to write the character for water more clearly. We're teaching each other small things that add up. A woman appears at the compound gate one afternoon wearing a plain jacket and looking around nervously. She asks to speak with someone about unbinding, and Ms. Catherine brings her inside to a quiet corner. I watch from across the courtyard as they talk in low voices. The woman keeps glancing at the gate like she's afraid someone followed her. She asks questions about her daughter who was bound last year and whether the damage can be reversed. Ms. Catherine explains the process and the risks honestly. The woman's face shows fear and uncertainty as she weighs family rejection against her child's suffering. After a long talk, she thanks Mrs. Catherine and leaves without making a decision. I watch her walk back through the gate and realize my escape has turned me into something bigger than myself. Other families are watching to see what happens to me. My choice carries weight I never asked for and didn't want. The mission holds a memorial service for the girl who died from binding complications. Several girls from the medical ward attend, including me. We sit on benches in a small courtyard while a teacher talks about the girl's short life. She was 6 years old. Her feet were bound for 8 months before infection killed her. The teacher asks if anyone wants to speak, and the courtyard goes silent. I feel words building in my throat and force myself to stand up. My voice shakes badly, but I manage one sentence about hoping her death means something, hoping it shows people why binding should stop. The words come out barely louder than a whisper, but everyone hears them. I sit back down quickly with my hands trembling. Other girls nod, but nobody else speaks. We sit together in quiet grief for someone we barely knew but understand completely. A messenger arrives from the magistrate's office carrying official papers with red seals. Miss Catherine reads them carefully and then explains what they say. The magistrate has issued a final notice stating I cannot be forced to return home while my feet are still healing, and medical risks continue. The custody question remains unsolved because my family disowned me, but the mission is granted temporary guardianship to keep me safe. The decision brings relief flooding through my chest. But Miss Catherine reminds me it's conditional and could change if circumstances shift. The protection isn't permanent or absolute. I nod, understanding that safety is always temporary, and I need to stay alert. The papers get filed away in a drawer, but I know where they are in case I need to see them again. Miss Catherine presents me with a pair of simple cloth shoes a few days later. They're plain blue cotton with soft soles and no hard edges. She helps me try them on, and they actually fit my feet properly without stuffing or gaps. I stand up carefully and take a few steps. The shoes don't press on my healing cuts or squeeze my toes. They feel comfortable instead of painful. I walk around the room testing them and feeling amazed that shoes can support feet without hurting them. The borrowed shoes I wore before were close, but these fit perfectly. Miss Catherine smiles, watching me walk back and forth. I keep the shoes on all day, even inside the compound. They remind me that my feet belong to me now, and I can choose comfort instead of torture. A new girl arrives at the mission compound, carried in by her uncle who opposes binding. She escaped her own ceremony the night before, and her feet are swollen from running. The nurse treats her wounds while she cries quietly. After a few days, when she can stand, I help her practice walking without fear. We hold hands and take slow steps together around the courtyard. Her grip is tight, like she's afraid of falling. I tell her the steps get easier with practice. We walk in small circles, and I show her how to put weight on her feet gradually. Once we both laugh at the same time when we successfully walk all the way across the courtyard. The sound surprises us, and we both look quickly toward the gate, checking for danger. But nobody's there. The shared moment of lightness feels fragile but real, like something we're learning to build together. Evening study time arrives, and the teacher passes out paper and brushes to everyone in the room. I take mine carefully and dip the brush in ink, watching the black liquid cling to the bristles. My hand shakes a little as I bring the brush to the paper, but I force myself to make the first stroke. The line comes out mostly straight. I add another stroke and then another, building the characters that spell my name. Nobody guides my hand or tells me where to place each mark. The brush moves where I want it to go, and the characters take shape under my own control. When I finish my name, I sit back and look at it. The strokes are a bit wobbly in places, but they're clear enough to read. Below my name, I add another character carefully forming the strokes for run. The teacher walks by and nods at my paper without saying anything. I smile down at the marks I made. They're mine. Nobody told me what to write or how to write it. The paper shows something that belongs completely to me in a way nothing ever did before. I practiced this character over and over during lessons until I could make it without thinking too hard. Now it sits on the page next to my name like proof of what I chose to do. The other girls finish their writing and we put the brushes away. My paper gets folded carefully and tucked under my sleeping mat where I can look at it tomorrow. When the lamps get turned down for lights out, I change into my sleeping clothes and kneel beside my bed. The cloth shoes Mr. Catherine gave me sit on the floor where I left them earlier. I pick them up and place them carefully beside the bed with the toes pointing toward the door. They're not positioned for running away this time. I'm not planning another escape in the middle of the night. The shoes just remind me that tomorrow morning I'll put them on and walk to breakfast on my own feet. Then I'll walk to lessons and back to meals and wherever else I need to go. My feet still hurt sometimes, especially when I've been standing too long, but they're getting stronger every day. The cuts are healing into pink scars that will probably stay forever. I climb into bed and pull the thin blanket up. Tomorrow is still uncertain. The magistrate's protection could change. My family could find new ways to pressure the mission. Nothing is completely safe or settled. But tonight I can close my eyes knowing my feet are healing the right way, and people here will fight to keep them whole. I turn on my side and let my eyes close. Sleep comes easier now than it did those first terrified nights. All right, friends, that's where we'll leave today's story. If this brightened your day even a tiny bit, hit that subscribe button and come back for more good vibes. I'll see you in the next one, and remember, you're doing amazing.